Welcome to our UCLA Extension Department of Business, Management, and Legal Programs video lecture series on entrepreneurship, new venture formation, and strategic business plan development. The video you're about to watch is an introduction on how to develop and document your operational mechanics. Basically, your procedure manual on how the departments of your organizations are going to be constructed and interface with each other. I'm Harry Redinger, your instructor. There is a total of over 40 videos in this lecture series that all integrate with our UCLA Extension online course program, Canvas. Each video strives to be brief and will have a little overlap with each other to tie our curriculum together. Okay, let's get started. The first slide we have up here is just so when we start developing our organizational mechanics, it's a good way to look at this process is, and this is going to come up in our video, preparing to go on an adventure, a voyage. You know, what are all the things we're going to need on this voyage? What are we going to need in terms of supplies and food and emergency provisions, tools, communication resources, whatever you might need for this journey. And so developing our organizational mechanics is where we take each department of the organization and we're basically writing little business plans, little procedure manuals on how administration will function, the job titles, job descriptions, accounting and bookkeeping, purchasing, human resource management, etc. So the focus of this particular lecture is how to drill down and study the details to assemble a procedure manual for each department of the organization. And a lot of creative brain work goes into developing this. But one of the benefits of developing a complete procedure manual or a set of mechanical sections in your business plan is when you do this, and I've got a magnifying glass, and when you really study, you know, the details of, you know, for office supplies and equipment and inventory and things like that needed to bring life to a department, you really start to know the organization like the back of your hand. You really can sit there and go, you know, I can do this. We can do this. This is doable. This whole idea of mine, my mission statement, my vision of success statement can actually be achieved. This isn't rocket science. This can be done. And you don't really get that kind of energy, that kind of self-confidence until you sit down and really study the finite details of what it's going to take to bring life to every little organ, if you will, or division of labor within the organization. So, so we're basically, in essence, going to be developing a company operational manuals, a manual for each department of the organization. Now, don't think of it as, you know, like a big, huge, thick book, but we're really looking at developing articles, an article or chapter for each department that we're going to include in our business plan and or to build a procedure manual. By the way, one of the spin-off benefits of this is within the next few videos, lectures in our curriculum, we're going to get into how to estimate startup funding needs. And when you go through this process to develop your operational mechanics, gosh, you know right away what you're going to need. There's no guesswork. It's already outlined in terms of equipment and staff and the number of staff and the payroll level for each staff member or approximate, you know, monthly, annual pay scale that you would need to bring the necessary talent in to run the business. So, if we look at the scale here, it says, operational manual, but policy, guidelines, practices, standards, rules, regulation, compliance. I mean, these are all subject matters that we want to keep in our mind as we go through this process of building each of the sections of our business plan. Excuse me, of our each mechanical section. I bring this particular slide up quite a bit because this truly is where the CEO masters how to conduct the orchestra. So again, the analogy that the organizational structure of an orchestra where the conductor is the CEO and out there are all the members of the orchestra, and then as a CEO, all the departments of the business. So just like an orchestra conductor knows exactly how the wind section works and the percussion section and the string section works, and how they blend together to bring on the same harmony to bring music alive. A CEO's got to be able to build from scratch, if you will, each department of the organization in terms of department descriptions, organizational structure, department organizational structure, job titles, job descriptions, and then most importantly, how that organization, how each segment of the organization is going to evolve per the phases of competitive development. So here we have a slide that has operational mechanics, ties everyone together. So we can think of one of the functions, the definitions of organizational administration is to coordinate the efforts and communications and dissemination of information to all the functional divisions of the organization, to all the vice presidents, all the department heads. So an umbrella is a really good way of graphically depicting this because the administration ties everyone together, puts everyone under the same roof, and for filing systems, phone, email, technology, so everything it takes to monitor the growth and development of all the departments and keep them, and I guess the key word here is parity. Keep them in sequence and parity with each other. This is the foundation of developing our mechanical sections, and it's the phase of competitive development worksheet. It is an essential concept and management tool to outline and assemble all of the departments and coordinating their growth. So as the organization evolves through its phases of competitive development, each department is in sync with the overall strategy of the organization. So here we can see we have our organizational structure at the top, and again, note that administration is over on the side because it is a functional division of labor also. And then on the left side, vertically, we have our phases of development. Now, I always work with, just for example purposes, a simple logical set such as business setup, marketing and sales, growth, and then profitability management. Always know that is a fail-safe set of phases of development if you just can't come up with anything. It's pretty dumb logic oriented. So our goal is to set this up, and then the next step is to take for each one of these boxes, and particularly for phase one or two, but we try to set it up so phase one represents all the money that's going to go out of the organization before money starts to come in. So how much are we going to have to spend before money can start to come back in as revenue and hopefully find a break-even point? So every little bullet word we put in these boxes symbolize a minimum amount of work we have to do to bring to assemble each functional division of labor as an organ within a living body to fulfill its functional requirements to launch the business into the marketplace. So for instance, under administration, we have lease office, buy computers, set up files, set up phones, order letterhead. For marketing, we have order brochure, set up database, design ads, presentations, presentation development. So just dumb logic. What do we need to get started? Now, this is one of those areas that you get into this. Again, using the magnifying analogy, and also this is where experience comes into play too. But this is where you have to really just use a lot of just basic logic. If you're going to go camping, don't forget the matches and toilet paper. I mean, if you're going to have a foundation, then you're going to have a frame. What basic kinds of things are you going to need to get this business off the ground? This is why I started this talk off by saying, visualize going on a venture. What do you have to pack? Because when the boat leaves, it's left. You can't run back in the medicine cabinet and grab the dental floss kind of thing, or the toothpaste and toothbrush. And if you didn't grab it, hopefully you can buy it on the way, but maybe you can't. Maybe if you're on a boat or a little dinghy and there's no way to get back to land, you've got a problem. So it's important that you really put a lot of brain work into what are all the little things I could need along this way. And because if you get this in the budget and get it now, you've got it there. And also all the little things you put in these boxes, could have a learning curve. Let's say in accounting, you have to buy QuickBooks and set up a tax ID and things like that. Well, all these things have a learning curve associated with it. They're not just physical products in some cases. Sometimes they're skills, they're talents. In some cases, you might put something like, become certified with a particular type of workplace skill or consulting skill in order to launch the business. So all these things represent money. They represent a logical necessity, but they also represent time. And so in essence, we're looking at a construction schedule for your business. And we can also use the same concept for doing a wide range of business startup estimating, cash flow estimating. So we can take all the bullet words that were put in each of these boxes, and we can come up with $1 for each one of them, a dollar amount for capital, for inventory, startup inventory. So we can put a cost estimate of all these little bullets in here, and then add it up and say, okay, that is probably pretty close to what we need to launch this business. Then we might throw some contingency in there. And there we go. But this also can be used not for buying things, and this gets really complicated. But and of course, this is the logic behind an Excel spreadsheet. Okay, so what we're doing here is a PowerPoint, but these same concept theory in terms of a table and columns and stuff, and adding columns up horizontally and vertically is an Excel spreadsheet kind of task. So this is just the logic of what an Excel spreadsheet might look like. But where it's really valuable is if we want to get a feel for what will be our payroll requirements. Estimating what your payroll requirements and payroll burden and payroll taxes and things like that is a real brain twister. And here we can get some kind of idea, and we're going to give you some techniques when we get into doing cash flow projection, which is a video that's a few lectures down the road from here, where we tie our phases of competitive development into a spreadsheet for estimating. But we can put in these boxes an approximation of months of income per a projected period of time for that phase. So let's say we allocate 3 3 months for startup marketing and market development, or 6 months. Well, then we can come back and say, okay, how much is our marketing team and marketing resources, brochures and ads and things like that going to cost? But sticking just to payroll, we can put office staff in there. We can put marketing staff. We're going to have some kind of, whatever the goods and services, we have to produce this now. So we can put task employees that produce the products and services, and we can get some kind of estimate of what we're going to need in terms of direct payroll, as well as outsourcing contract type estimates. So what's really cool is, in the process of developing a complete and detailed phase of competitive development worksheet, now we can take a look at each department, which at some point we're going to delegate the leadership of that department to a director or vice president, but we can get a feel for how that department is going to evolve in terms of its functions and tasks from the very beginning all the way down. So we can vertically take a look at how each department is going to evolve per the phase of competitive development in terms of staff size, capitalization, procedures, etc. So it gives that idea of how the overall organization is going to evolve, but how each department is going to evolve. And that gives you, the CEO, if you're able to visualize it, a higher sense of self-confidence of what you're doing and where you're going with the organization. Okay, so now we're going to start actually get into the details of how we're going to develop these mechanical sections, the format of the mechanical sections of your business plan or for your organization in terms of developing an operational manual. So one of the things we want to point out, now we pointed this out in previous lectures, that when we developed the competitive strategy section in terms of our internal management strategy, one of the objectives was, as you recall, to develop our phases of competitive development strategy. And those phases, the titles, and then the paragraph that explains what each phase is going to do in terms of global company objectives, those phase titles now are going to be repeated verbatim in each of these mechanical sections. So where it says mechanical sections going across, each one of those little boxes there represents a separate document, a separate procedure manual for that department, such as company administration or manufacturing operations, or production management, marketing and sales, personnel department, accounting and bookkeeping, etc. So they're all going to have the same phases of development title, but what we put in there in terms of developmental instructions, in terms of what this department's going to do, is going to be totally different. But it's going to be in sync with what everyone else is doing per each phase. Study the details. Study the details. And this is something, I mean, if you got a lot of experience, you can probably knock this out in an afternoon. But the reality is, if you're new to an industry, this is something can actually be days of work and maybe even interviewing and doing research to find out what is it really going to take to, develop a manufacturing line or field reps that do some kind of technical process or procedure. So a lot of time could go into researching and understanding how this is done. And it's essential because we're going to turn around. Think of what you're doing right now as the work of an architect. And when you're done, you're going to give all these manuals to, or shall we say, architectural drawings, if you will, to a general contractor or a construction manager. And this person is going to start estimating what it's going to cost to build this and to staff it. And so he's going to put an estimate on this, and then he's going to come back and say, okay, from a startup funding needs point of view, this is what you've got to finance. Okay, this is just a little inspirational slide here. I can make this happen. But, it's not until you start, detailing, getting everything out, and the whole process of developing these mechanical sections and taking every aspect from accounting and human resource management and what am I going to need and when am I going to need it, and start to really go, hey, it only makes sense. I better, remember or include this in the budget. Such as if you're going to go camping, it only makes sense that you remember the matches and toilet paper, because you don't want to get out there and have to go to the bathroom and not have any toilet paper, or start a campfire without any matches, or worse yet, have a bottle of wine and forget the corkscrew kind of thing. So, we want to really, think, if I've got this, then what else am I going to need? And the more we do it, the more we realize, I can make this happen. One of the benefits of developing these procedure manuals, because when you launch the business, you're now going to go out there and say, okay, I got to really make this thing work. It's no longer, it's no longer an idea. We're doing it. And you're going to see, experience firsthand, do the cycles work? Do startup procedures work if it's a restaurant? Closing operation, closing procedures. We have to go through all these steps and, and procedures to make this happen, and it can get kind of, it gets kind of complicated. But the more we study, and when we take a look at this exponential growth curve here, we know that it usually takes about 2.5 years for an organization to incubate. That's a good word, to incubate. To work out all the details and nuts and bolts, as we start to build infrastructure and understand our operations manual, and work that into really good plays and procedures. When we do that, then all of a sudden, 2.5 years into the process, it's like magic happens. It's all of a sudden, now, because we invested in developing these mechanical sections and trained staff to do it, or to coordinate with outsourcing resources, now we can start to work on the business and not in the business. If we don't do this, we're running around doing all this work ourselves. And if we're training people to do this along the way, when the market realizes you're there, you're in business, you've compromised the barriers of entry, you're in the marketplace, that's when the phone really starts to ring. That's when the emails start to fly in. That's when the orders start coming in. And if you did it right, then things just take off, because now you've got economies of scale. If you did your mission statement and organizational structure stuff correctly, as you grow, they don't have to change. They're valid if it's a 1-person firm or a 500-person firm, because you took the time to really think out the functional divisions of labor. And so expanding, because you already got the job description already written. If you try and expand and don't even have job descriptions written, it gets a little confusing really fast, because you have to go, well, let me explain to you what you're doing, versus, here's a written description of your job function here. So again, one of the big benefits of developing our mechanical sections is that we now have a logical phase of competitive development that is supported by these mechanical sections that allow us to expand and contract with the ebb and flow of the marketplace. We talked a bit about Stephen Covey's time management matrix. And the reason why I bring this up, relevant to the quadrant 2, is an understanding that when crisis happens, or something that's urgent and important, a quadrant 1 thing comes up, and we know that it could come up again, we want to develop a procedure. It wants to be added to one of the departments as a mechanical operational procedure. So if it happens again, it's a part of business. It's all of a sudden important, but it's not urgent. We have a system for it. It's when the things that we forgot to develop a plan for come up, and oh my God, we're getting sued or something, or we got a letter from the IRS, or we got a pissed off customer. And it's an important customer, because it's bad market press. then we got to stop everything. It's a quadrant run. It's an urgent and it's important, and it controls our time. And we really don't want those kinds of things to happen. And in fact, if more than 10% of our time starts going into that stuff, from a leadership standpoint, we can start to have survival problems in terms of just burning out and things of that sort. So as we come across anything that's a potential, problem, we want to develop a procedure for handling it. So if it comes up again, it's already in an operational manual in terms of how we do it. Another important point, because I talked much about Rick Pitino's Success is a Choice book throughout our lecture series. And this gets down to demand, is success luck, or is success a choice? Well, if we take these operational manuals, these mechanical sections of your business plan, and think of them as a playbook for a football team or a basketball team, how we're going to do the triple whammy play or the flea flicker or a defensive or offensive type play in a game, our procedure manual is like a playbook. And as a company, from a human resources training standpoint, we want to rehearse. We want to practice these plays over and over and over and over again, because as we practice these plays, when the situation comes up, we just do it. We don't have to go, oh my God, look what's happening. We just instinctively handle it, just like catching a pass or throwing a pass or making a block in football. We're trained just instinctively do it. We don't have to sit there and scratch our head and think about it. From a tactical standpoint, we just instinctively know what to do and do it because we trained over and over and over and over again. So now it's just it's a response. It's not a crisis. I now want to get into the four sections of a mechanical section, or the four parts, the four-part format for a mechanical section. So when we take the organizational structure, those are for every box on our org structure, that's a department, including administration. So the first thing we want to do is write out a department description. Little sidebar note here. The description of every department is to support the mission statement and its objective to achieve the vision of success statement. So know that each department of the organization fundamentally is to support the mission of the company, what it's selling, to whom it's selling, and what makes it competitively different. And so the department description is a paragraph that says this is the meaning of life for this department, be it finance or accounting or production or shipping and delivery, etc. The next thing is that we're going to outline a department organizational structure. Now, just like for the overall organization where we have division of labor leads to specialization leads to increased output, here we're going to have, again, division of labor leads to specialization leads to increased output, but these are the functional divisions of labor that happens within a department. So for like accounting, for example, you're going to have accounts receivable, accounts payable, general ledger, insurances, taxes, correspondence with CPA. We'll have categories that will be broken down in terms of the logical divisions of labor to run an accounting department. Or for manufacturing, you might have an ordering or purchasing, might be a sub-department of manufacturing or a department in itself. Administration is going to have advisory board coordination, strategic planning, filing, inter-corporate communication policies, things of this sort. The next is we're going to outline the jobs, job titles, and job descriptions for that department. So this gets kind of interesting because some departments might sound like they're just one job function in there. But when we do this, and every industry is different, but we have to do it from the standpoint of that every industry has to have some way to reward its staff with titles. So, in every industry, in terms of whether you're an associate, a junior associate, senior associate, principal associate, senior principal, vice president, senior vice president, senior executive vice president. I mean, it gets kind of crazy, but every industry is going to have some kind of normal kind of pay scale structure relevant to titles. And for each title, we want to talk about what's the expected level of knowledge, experience, and things this sort. So people have incentive to try harder to achieve a higher status and position within the organization. So job titles have a direct relationship to skills, talents, experience, and pay scale. And that's something that you want to figure out before you hire people and get the organization going. So even if it's just a two-person firm, you want to establish that kind of corporate culture at the very beginning so that when you do implement it, because you will have to implement this at some point, nobody feels unfairly demoted or they have an understanding of where they are in your eyes as the leader of the organization that's establishing levels of authority and seniority in the organization. So here comes the final part of the four-part format of a mechanical section is department phases of development descriptions. So here we're going to take the titles of the phases of competitive development developed in the competitive strategy section, but now we're going to write a paragraph as to how that department is going to evolve. Now, sometimes because of the startup situation of the company, certain departments might not even be created yet. So from that standpoint, for some of the phases, we might say just N/A, not applicable. Like we might not have an advisory board at the very beginning, or we may have, or maybe the advisory board disbands at a certain point. So just know that sometimes when it comes to certain phases, we might just put it's not applicable, it's not relevant to that department at that phase. And that's just something to kind of keep in mind. The next step in developing our four-part, this is our example here. So here's an example company administration of mechanical sections. So, so department description: to manage and oversee all internal and external operations, and this is for administration, by the way. Company administration mechanical section, department description: to manage and oversee all mechanical, all internal and external operations and leadership, to develop and execute all strategic planning operations, to assemble and manage an advisory board, to coordinate all internal company communications, to oversee and manage all forms of litigation. I think I'm just getting creative here, but anything that's global, that's relevant to management of the company internally and externally, that's like a CEO function, we would list that there. And then next we have a department organizational structure. So company administration, we have strategic planning, external leadership and communications, internal leadership and communications, phone, mail, and computer communications and filing systems, managing all legal entity transactions and responsibilities. That's just an example of how administration might have divisions of labor that would be, that would need equipment, staff, etc. Next are job titles and job descriptions. President, to oversee and manage all aspects of the organization in the execution of the strategic plan to achieve the vision of success statement of the organization. To recruit and hire all senior staff members. To administer the administration's department description. So that's just a brief way of saying, okay, this is what the C does. Then we have chief operations officer to manage all internal operations of the company. Office manager to set up and manage all internal organization communication systems. Chief Technology Officer to set up and manage all information management systems and website operations. And then Office Assistant to support the administration department functions as directed by senior management. So that gives you kind of hold on just a minute. And then departments phase of competitive development. Phase 1, business startup. Develop and set up all administrative systems necessary to support Phase 2, market development operations. Phase 2, market development operations, hire and train all senior managers and staff necessary to establish the business, acquire enough market share to survive, and to establish enough cash flow to surpass the break-even point with a healthy profit margin. Phase 3, growth, commence expanding the company into new markets by recruiting proven, executing proven to work market development strategies. This is creative writing here. Phase 4, profitability management, expand and contract the expand and contract the size of the organization, the size of the company in accordance with the ebb and flow of the market to maintain a healthy profit margin. So that gives you just some kind of an idea of the 4-part format for a mechanical section. Again, it's really important to understand each functional division of labor in the company from the standpoint, so you as the entrepreneur, you as CEO, president, or company owner can intuitively know what each department's doing and how they do it. This way, if something goes wrong on the fly, you just inherently kind of know how to adjust right there on the spot, and right there the instructions to give from the standpoint of conducting an orchestra on how the rest of the department is going to change. Think of it a little bit like you're a football player, a quarterback on a football team, and your offensive line is lined up and you got your backs behind you, and you come up to the line to have the ball hike you, and then you notice something in the defense. There's a gap, an opportunity to capitalize on the way they've lined up, and then you can call an audible. So whatever the code word is, where skip the play I just told you, audible. Instead, do a double flea flicker. And the defense that you're competing against doesn't know what this means. It's code, but everyone knows that you're changing the play right, and then 1, 2, 3, and then you do the play and capitalize on that opportunity. Now, if everyone on the team has practiced all these plays over and over again, it's possible. It's all right. Everyone's going to understand. Everyone's going to right away. They're going to look up and go, "Oh my gosh, they don't have a defensive back in that area of the backfield. That's a huge opportunity." And so everybody goes, "We get it," and then hike the ball and then touchdown. So by understanding all the departments of the organization to this degree, and have everyone else participating in how this is all set up, but now we have more options to adjust our strategy on the fly in a very competent way. I put up here, just for jest's sake, some organizational structures, department organizational structures, one for the marketing and sales department, project management, accounting department, just so you can get a kind of a feel for, how different departments can be set up. I want to note that there is no standard structure for any department, any business. It's all kind of unique to how you design it, how you work with your management and staff in designing the problems. You might have a design to get it going, but this stuff, as soon as you go in the business, people realize how to do things better, how to be more efficient, more effective. And so you really want to find departmental structures that work best with the people that are in that department. Remember, these boxes represent functional divisions of labor, not job titles, not people. Because the second we start putting people's names in there, it's not scalable anymore. This is just a little reminder to study the details. It's amazing what you discover. And then also, as I mentioned at the very beginning of our talk, this is like adventure trip planning. You wanna make sure you got everything on board you're going to need for the journey. If you forget something, you might not be able to run back home or to the office and get it. So it's like packing, a suitcase or a trunk, so that as you start and launch the business for phase one, you've got everything on board you're going to need to get this business off the ground in the marketplace. And just a little humor here. If you're going to go camping, don't forget the matches and toilet paper. They're pretty essential, and perhaps it's very easy to forget, but you don't want to be caught in the middle of nowhere camping and not have these particular items. Another thing too, and this is kind of a funny analogy, but once you assemble a mechanical sections, and particularly once you assemble an entire business plan, but when the mechanical sections are fully assembled, and you've gone through back and forth, and you've studied and researched, and you're feeling really good that this is a game plan that's going to work. I mean, if I can hire these people and get that marketing going and get customers going, this is going to work. So it's kind of like a doctor slapping the butt of a baby, and it takes its first breath of air and comes alive. And so that's one of the kind of the magical things of the mechanical sections is they're organs. And when you get them all hooked up and then infuse some capital into them, it's like getting slapping the butt of the baby, and it's alive. And that's our objective as an entrepreneur, is assemble these functional divisions of labor and bring life to the organization. Very, very much the same way like Dr. Frankenstein with Frank. It's walking around, the guy with the bolt through the neck, and so, Frank's walking around making income and bringing back revenue to you, and that's our objective. Anyway, to that note, that completes our brief talk on how to develop your operational mechanics sections. See you at our next lecture.